Logan Carter slammed his palm against the steering wheel, his jaw tightening as his sleek black Aston Martin sputtered to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The dashboard flickered before the engine gave one last, pathetic whine and died completely. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath, shoving the door open and stepping out onto the deserted road. This was supposed to be a simple drive, just a few hours from Chicago to an investor's retreat. But thanks to his car breaking down in the middle of nowhere, he was now stranded in some tiny town that didn't even show up on his GPS. He grabbed his phone, only to see the dreaded no-service message blinking at him. Perfect, just perfect. A gust of wind carried the scent of warm bread and cinnamon through the air, cutting through his frustration. He turned, his gaze landing on the only sign of life nearby, a small, rustic bakery with a hanging wooden sign that reads Sweet Haven. With no other choice, Logan strode toward it, pushing open the door. A bell chimed overhead, and the scent of sugar and vanilla wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. "Be right with you," a voice called from the back. A moment later, a woman emerged, dusting flour off her hands. Logan's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't what he expected. Her honey-blonde hair was tied up in a messy bun, a streak of flour across her cheek. She wore a simple apron over a pale yellow dress, and despite the heat from the ovens behind her, she looked effortlessly radiant. Her bright green eyes locked onto his, and for a second, Logan forgot why he was even here. Can I help you?" she asked, tilting her head. Logan cleared his throat, forcing himself to snap out of it. "Yeah, my car broke down a few minutes back, no cell service." "Any chance there's a mechanic around?" Her lips pulled into a knowing smile. "You must be new around here. We've got one mechanic, but old Joe's out fishing till tomorrow." "Looks like you're stuck here for the night," he exhaled sharply. "Great." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm Claire, by the way." "Logan, you look like you could use a coffee," she said, nodding toward a small table by the window. "Come on, city boy, I won't bite." Logan hesitated. He wasn't used to small talk, let alone being stuck in a place like this with no control over the situation. But right now, he didn't have many options. He sat down, watching as she poured him a steaming cup of coffee. The warmth seeped into his fingers as he took a sip, surprised by how good it was. "You don't seem like the type who gets stranded in tiny towns," Claire mused, sitting across from him. He smirked. "And you don't seem like the type who runs a bakery in the middle of nowhere," she laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made something unfamiliar stir in his chest. "Born and raised here. My grandmother started this bakery and I took over after she passed. It's home." Logan glanced around. The place was cozy, filled with mismatched chairs and shelves lined with homemade jams and pastries. It wasn't anything like the high-end restaurants and offices he was used to, but there was something comforting about it. "Must be nice," he found himself saying. Claire arched a brow. "You say that like you don't have a home." He hesitated. Did he? His penthouse in Chicago was luxurious, sure, but it never really felt like home. It was just a place to sleep between long hours at the office. Before he could reply, the door opened, and an elderly woman walked in, giving Claire a warm smile. "Oh, sweetie, I forgot to pick up my cinnamon rolls this morning." Claire jumped up. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. Let me grab them for you." Logan watched as Claire handed over a neatly wrapped box, refusing any payment. "It's on the house," she said with a wink. The older woman beamed. "You're too kind, dear." As Mrs. Thompson left, Logan crossed his arms. "You just give away your pastries for free," Claire shrugged. "Mrs. Thompson's been coming here for years." "She's like family." Logan shook his head. In his world, money was everything, nothing was ever free, and yet Claire gave without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. It was foreign. And oddly refreshing. You're really not from around here, huh? Claire teased, noticing his expression. No, he admitted, I'm not. She grinned. Well, Logan, looks like you're getting a crash course in small-town life, he smirked. Lucky me. For the first time since his car broke down, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to leave. The evening air was crisp as Logan stepped outside the bakery, stretching his arms as he took in the quiet surroundings. The golden glow of the setting sun painted the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, casting long shadows over the sleepy town. It was a stark contrast to the towering cityscape he was used to, the ever-present hum of traffic replaced by the distant chirp of crickets. Claire locked the bakery's door, tucking the key into her apron pocket. So, what's the plan, city guy? You sleeping in your car tonight? Logan glanced toward his Aston Martin, still parked uselessly down the road. The thought of spending the night crammed in the driver's seat was less than appealing. Not my first choice, he admitted. Claire tapped her chin, considering. Well, there's the inn near the town square, but old Mr. Howard doesn't always keep the desk manned at this hour. If you're out of luck there, I've got a spare room at my place. Her casual offer caught him off guard. He wasn't used to people, especially strangers, offering kindness without an ulterior motive. You sure about that? He asked, studying her expression. Claire smirked. I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't, he exhaled, shaking his head slightly. You really don't know what to make of me, do you? Not even a little, she said with a grin. But that's half the fun. As they walked toward the town square, Logan took in the surroundings with fresh eyes. A few shops lined the main street, most of them already closed for the evening. A handful of locals sat on benches, chatting in the glow of string lights draped between the lampposts. Everything about this place felt untouched by the hurried pace of the world he knew. When they reached the inn, Logan knocked on the door. After a long pause, a dim light flickered on inside, and an elderly man slowly emerged, rubbing his eyes. Howard's Inn is closed for the night, he mumbled, squinting at them through the glass window. Claire leaned forward, voice warm. It's me, Mr. Howard. Any chance you've got a spare room for my friend here? The old man blinked, then shook his head. Not tonight, sweetheart. Got the plumbing torn up in half the rooms. No hot water. Claire turned to Logan with an amused shrug. Looks like you're stuck with me. Logan sighed, but there was a flicker of something else beneath his usual frustration, curiosity. He wasn't sure what it was about Claire, but the idea of spending more time around her didn't seem like the worst thing. They walked a few blocks to her place, a modest but charming two-story house with a wraparound porch. A porch swing swayed slightly in the breeze, and the soft glow from the windows made the whole place feel inviting. Come on in, Claire said, pushing the door open. The interior was just as cozy as her bakery, filled with warm colors and shelves lined with books and framed photographs. The scent of cinnamon lingered in the air, mingling with something floral. You can take the guest room upstairs, she said, pointing toward the staircase. Bathrooms down the hall, make yourself at home. Logan set down his bag, glancing around. You live here alone, Claire nodded, moving toward the kitchen. Yep. Well, unless you count Benny. Benny. As if on cue, a fat orange cat sauntered into the room, eyeing Logan with lazy suspicion before hopping onto the couch and curling into a ball. Claire laughed at Logan's uncertain expression. Don't worry, he only bites if you insult his intelligence. Logan smirked. Noted. Claire disappeared into the kitchen, and a moment later the sound of clinking mugs filled the air. Logan leaned against the doorway, watching as she poured 2 cups of tea. You don't strike me as the tea-drinking type, he remarked. She handed him a mug, steam curling into the air. And you don't strike me as someone who's ever stayed in a town like this before. Fair point. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Claire finally broke it. "So what exactly do you do in the city, Logan?" he exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Business, investments, mergers, the usual." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds thrilling," he chuckled. "Depends on who you ask." "Sounds like a lot of pressure." Logan hesitated. Few people ever asked about the weight of his responsibilities. They only cared about the success, the money, the power. But Claire wasn't looking at him like he was some big-shot CEO. She was just looking at him. "It can be," he admitted. "But I built my company from the ground up. I don't really have the option to slow down." Claire studied him for a moment before setting her tea down. "Maybe you should," he frowned. "Slow down," she nodded. "You've been in town for less than a day, and you already look like you're waiting for the next meeting, the next deal, the next move. Maybe getting stranded here wasn't just bad luck. Maybe it's the universe telling you to take a breath." Logan scoffed. "You think the universe has a plan for me?" Claire grinned. "Stranger things have happened." He looked at her, really looked at her. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, completely at ease in her own world, unaffected by the rush of everything outside it. And for the first time in a long time, Logan wasn't thinking about his next deal. He was just here, with her. Morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of Claire's guest room, casting golden streaks across Logan's face. He blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The bed was softer than he was used to, the scent of lavender lingering faintly in the sheets. For a moment, he just lay there, listening. No honking cars, no ringing phones, no urgent emails demanding his attention. Just birds chirping outside and the distant sound of something sizzling in the kitchen. He exhaled, pushing himself up. In the hallway, the rich aroma of caramelized sugar and fresh bread grew stronger. He followed it to the kitchen, where Claire stood by the stove, flipping thick slices of French toast onto a plate. She glanced over her shoulder, her expression amused. "Morning, city boy. Sleep okay?" Logan ran a hand through his hair. "Better than I expected." Claire slid a plate toward him, golden toast dusted with powdered sugar, a side of sliced peaches arranged neatly beside it. "Figured you'd need something hearty before dealing with Joe and his ancient toolbox." Logan sat, grabbing a fork. "So, Joe actually exists." "I was starting to think your one mechanic was a myth," Claire laughed. "Oh, he's real. Just operates on his own timeline." The first bite of French toast was unexpectedly rich, the perfect balance of crispy and soft. Logan hadn't realized how hungry he was until now. Claire leaned against the counter. "So, what's the plan after Joe works his magic? Straight back to the city?" Logan chewed thoughtfully. That had been the plan, hadn't it? Fix the car, get back to work, resume his life. But now the thought of leaving felt complicated. He studied Claire across the kitchen, the way she moved with effortless ease, as if she belonged to this place in a way he'd never belonged anywhere. "Yeah," he said, though the word felt heavy on his tongue, "back to the city." If Claire noticed his hesitation, she didn't press. Instead, she grabbed her keys. "Come on. Let's get you to Joe before he decides to take another fishing trip." Joe's garage was a cluttered mess of tools, oil cans, and auto parts that looked like they predated Logan's entire company. The man himself was built like an oak tree, his gray beard streaked with grease, his overalls smudged from years of work. He glanced up from under the hood of an old pickup when Claire and Logan walked in. "Ah, so you're the fella with the fancy car." Logan crossed his arms. "That would be me." Joe wiped his hands on a rag. "Heard it broke down a few miles out. Sounds like a fuel pump issue. I'll tow it in, take a look." Claire grinned. "See. Told you he was real." Logan smirked. "I stand corrected." Joe motioned to the tow truck parked outside. "Might take a few hours. You two go on, enjoy the town." "I'll call when it's ready." Claire turned to Logan. "Guess you're stuck with me a little longer." He didn't mind. They wandered through the small town, Claire pointing out places as they passed a bookstore with shelves stacked to the ceiling, a park where kids raced on bicycles, a farmer's market setting up for the weekend. At one point, they stopped at a weathered wooden bridge overlooking a slow-moving creek. The water shimmered under the late morning sun, the air thick with the scent of blooming wildflowers. Claire leaned on the railing, staring at the water below. "You ever wonder what it would be like to just stop?" Logan frowned. "Stop what?" She gestured vaguely. "The rush. The constant chasing of the next thing. The next deal, the next success. Just be still for a while." He exhaled, resting his forearms on the railing. "I wouldn't even know how." Claire turned her head, studying him. "You could learn." Logan met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Reception must have finally kicked in. He pulled it out, seeing dozens of missed calls and messages. Work. The real world crashing back in. Claire must have seen something shift in his expression. She straightened, stepping back. "Looks like reality's calling." Logan hesitated, thumb hovering over his screen. Then, with a slow breath, he locked the phone and shoved it back into his pocket. "It can wait," Claire blinked. "Really?" he smirked. "I think the universe is telling me to take a breath." Her laughter was soft, but it settled deep in his chest. They stood there a little longer, the world slowing just enough for him to wonder maybe getting stranded wasn't an accident at all. Logan leaned against the railing of the bridge, watching as Claire's fingers traced the grain of the old wood. The soft murmur of the creek below filled the silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it hummed with an unspoken question neither of them seemed ready to answer. Joe's call had come in an hour ago, confirming that Logan's car was fixed and ready to go. Yet, he hadn't moved. He hadn't rushed off like he would have any other time, back to his towering office, to meetings that never ended, to a life that suddenly felt strangely hollow. Claire turned slightly, her green eyes catching the afternoon light. "So this is it, huh?" The weight of the moment pressed against Logan's chest. It should have been simple: thank her, get in his car, drive back to Chicago. Instead, everything in him resisted the inevitability of leaving. "I don't know," he admitted. A breeze swept through, lifting a few strands of her hair, and she tucked them behind her ear, watching him carefully. "You don't know," he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I came here expecting to be gone in a few hours. Now I'm standing on a bridge with you, thinking about things He stopped himself, shaking his head. Claire let out a quiet laugh. "Thinking about what?" Logan hesitated. But when he looked at her, the words spilled out before he could stop them. "What it would be like to stay." The amusement in her expression faded, replaced by something softer, something uncertain. She searched his face like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. "You have a whole life in Chicago," she said carefully. "Do I?" The question surprised even him. "Or do I just have a schedule?" Claire folded her arms, looking away toward the water. "Logan, you don't belong here." Something in his chest tightened. "That's not your decision to make." She faced him again, her expression conflicted. "I'm not saying I want you to leave." "Then why are you pushing me away?" She let out a breath, her fingers gripping the railing. "Because people like you, people with lives like yours, you don't just stay. Maybe you think you want to now, but what happens in a week, a month? When your world pulls you back?" Logan stepped closer, his voice quieter but firm. "And what if it doesn't?" Claire swallowed hard, her guard wavering. "You don't know that." He reached for her hand and she didn't pull away, his fingers curled around hers, grounding them in the moment. "I know that being here, being with you, is the first time in a long time I've felt like I could breathe." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. Logan lifted her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heartbeat. "Tell me honestly that you don't feel this too." Claire's breath hitched, and for a long moment she didn't say anything. But then, slowly, she whispered, "I do." The world seemed to pause around them. Logan took another step, closing the space between them. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. She didn't move away. "If I stay," he murmured, "it won't be because I got stranded. It'll be because I found something worth staying for." Claire's eyes searched his, raw and vulnerable. Then, finally, she whispered the words that changed everything. "Then stay." Logan didn't need any more convincing. He closed the distance, capturing her lips in a kiss that was slow and deep, filled with every unspoken thought, every unsaid feeling. Claire melted into him, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Claire let out a soft, stunned laugh. "I can't believe this is happening." Logan grinned, resting his forehead against hers. "Neither can I." But as he held her in his arms, standing on that old wooden bridge in a town he never planned to stay in, he realized something. Sometimes, the best things in life weren't planned at all. Logan had never experienced a silence quite like this before, not the stiff, corporate kind filled with ticking clocks and unspoken negotiations, nor the restless quiet of his penthouse, buzzing with the weight of unfinished work. This was different. This was the kind of silence that settled, warm and steady, like the feeling of standing in sunlight after a long, cold winter. Claire was still in his arms, her breath a soft rhythm against his chest. Neither of them spoke for a long time, as if breaking the moment would make it disappear. But Logan knew one thing for certain: he wasn't disappearing. She finally pulled back just enough to look up at him, her fingers still curled in the fabric of his shirt. "You really mean it?" she asked, her voice quieter now, like she was afraid to believe it. Logan didn't hesitate. "Yeah. I do." A slow exhale left her lips, and for the first time since they met, he saw something flicker in her eyes that hadn't been there before: hope. Claire took a step back, her arms falling to her sides as she laughed, shaking her head. "You know you're insane, right?" Logan smirked. "I prefer determined." She rolled her eyes, but he could see the way her lips twitched, fighting back a smile. "You don't even know how to live in a town like this. You're going to lose your mind without your constant emails and overpriced coffee." Logan crossed his arms, tilting his head. "You make a mean cup of coffee." "I think I'll survive." Claire bit her lip, studying him. "And your company," he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I have people who can handle things without me for a while. And if they can't, then maybe I've been doing something wrong." Her brows lifted slightly, as if she hadn't expected that answer. "You'd really just step back," Logan shrugged. "I built my company from the ground up. But what's the point of building something if I don't have a life outside of it?" Claire's expression softened, and for a moment, she just watched him, as if she was seeing him differently now. Then she shook her head with a smirk. "All right, city boy, let's see if you can actually make it here." The challenge in her voice sent something electric through him. "I'm up for it," she grinned. "Good, because small-town life isn't as easy as it looks." And just like that, Logan realized this wasn't just about staying. This was about proving that he belonged here. The adjustment wasn't immediate. The first morning, Logan woke up to the sound of Claire's alarm blaring at 5:30, a time he usually reserved for the gym in his high-rise building, not for rolling out of bed and heading straight into a kitchen that smelled like vanilla and fresh dough. Claire had already started prepping for the bakery's morning rush by the time he stumbled downstairs. She barely glanced up from where she was kneading dough at the counter. "You look like you regret every decision that led you here," Logan grunted, rubbing his face. "I don't function before 7, Claire smirked, sliding a steaming cup of coffee toward him. "You're going to have to learn." And learn he did. By the end of the first week, Logan had burned himself on a tray of croissants, nearly set off the smoke alarm trying to make caramel, and discovered that flour had an uncanny ability to get everywhere. But he also learned how to roll out dough with just the right amount of pressure, how to tell when bread was perfectly golden, and most importantly, how to watch Claire work. Because when Claire was baking, she was in her element. Her hands moved with practiced ease, her focus unwavering as she blended ingredients together like it was second nature. She didn't just run a bakery. She poured herself into every loaf, every pastry, every cup of coffee handed across the counter with a warm smile. And Logan. He was starting to understand why people stayed in places like this. The town didn't make it easy on him, though. Word spread fast that the big city millionaire had decided to stick around. And suddenly, Logan found himself the subject of amused, skeptical, and downright curious glances from almost everyone. At the farmer's market, an older woman selling honey squinted at him before handing him a jar. "You ever even been to a farmer's market before?" Logan smirked. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed. "Stick with Claire. She'll keep you from making a fool of yourself." At the diner, the owner, a burly man named Hank, crossed his arms and gave Logan a once-over before grunting. "You planning on sticking around for real, or is this a vacation?" Logan met his gaze evenly. "I'm serious about staying," Hank grunted again. "We'll see." Even Joe, the mechanic, gave him a skeptical look when Logan stopped by to check on his car. "You're really not headed back to the city?" Logan leaned against the counter. "Nope," Joe chuckled. "Well, guess that means I won't be making any money off your fancy car breaking down again." The town wasn't convinced yet, but Logan wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't until 2 weeks in that Logan realized something had shifted. He was wiping down the bakery's counters after closing when Claire leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching him with an unreadable expression. He glanced up. "What?" She hesitated, then pushed away from the door, stepping closer. "You really don't miss it?" Logan set the rag down. "The city," she nodded. He thought about it. The adrenaline of closing a deal, the rush of pushing himself past exhaustion, the prestige of being at the top. Then he looked at Claire, standing in this bakery he had grown to love in a town that was slowly starting to feel like home, and the answer was simple. "No," he said, his voice sure. "I don't." Claire's breath caught slightly, and for the first time Logan saw the last bit of doubt in her eyes disappear. She reached for his hand, fingers lacing through his. "Then I guess you're really one of us now." Logan smiled, squeezing her hand. "Guess so." And just like that, he knew he hadn't just gotten stranded in this town. He'd found where he was always meant to be. The air carried the scent of freshly tilled earth as Logan stood at the edge of Claire's garden, watching her tug a stubborn weed from the soil. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her skin. He couldn't help but smirk. She was completely in her element, unbothered by the mess, while he still had to resist the urge to check if his shoes had sunk too deep into the damp ground. Claire glanced up, catching his expression. "You're laughing at me." Logan shook his head, crouching beside her. "Not at you. Just at how different this is from what I imagined my life would be." She arched an eyebrow, brushing loose strands of hair from her face. "And what did you imagine?" He let out a breath, running his fingers through the soil. "Endless meetings, a packed schedule, more money, more power, more deals. I thought that was the only way to be successful." He turned his head, meeting her gaze. "But then I came here and suddenly I started measuring success differently." She studied him for a moment, her green eyes searching. "And what does success look like now?" Logan reached for her hand, tracing slow circles against her palm. "Waking up without feeling like the world is waiting for me to conquer it. Spending time actually living, not just working." His grip tightened slightly. "Being with you." Claire's breath hitched and she swallowed hard. "You make it sound like I'm some grand revelation," Logan smirked. "You are." She shook her head, laughing softly, but there was warmth in her eyes. You always this smooth. With you. Only when it's the truth. Claire exhaled, pressing her forehead against his briefly before pulling back. Her gaze flickered downward, and she ran her fingers through the soil between them. You really think you can make this work, staying here, building something different? Logan didn't hesitate. Yeah, I do. Claire studied him, then let out a breath, nodding. All right, city boy. She patted his chest lightly before standing. Let's see what you've got. The weeks that followed tested him in ways he never expected. Adjusting to the slower pace of life wasn't just about learning the rhythms of the town or waking up early to help Claire at the bakery. It was about unlearning years of habits, checking his phone constantly, thinking in terms of profit and losses, expecting everything to be a transaction. And yet, the longer he stayed, the more natural it became. He found himself taking long walks through town with Claire, learning the names of people he once thought he'd never see again. He helped fix the old fence behind the bakery, staining his hands with paint and laughing as Claire teased him for his uneven strokes. He even learned how to make her signature cinnamon rolls, though his first attempt had ended with flour in his hair, and Claire doubled over in laughter. But more than anything, he learned what it felt like to be truly present. To sit on Claire's porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling her fingers intertwined with his. To wake up every morning with purpose, not because he had an empire to run, but because he had a life worth living. And he knew, without a doubt, that this was where he was meant to be. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. The crickets hummed in the distance, and the town lights flickered like fireflies in the night. Logan ran his fingers through her hair, the steady rhythm grounding him. Claire sighed, tilting her head slightly. You still keeping that penthouse in Chicago? Logan smirked. Why? Planning on visiting, she chuckled. Just wondering if you're still holding onto a backup plan. He considered that for a moment, then shook his head. No. I don't need one. Claire lifted her face to look at him, something unreadable in her expression. You're really all in, aren't you? Logan cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing against her skin. Yeah, I am. A slow smile spread across her lips. Good. She kissed him then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that didn't just promise forever, it confirmed it. And as Logan pulled her closer, he knew that for the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing success. He had already found it. Right here, with her.